Thank you for joining. So just a few logistics. Those of you using headsets or speakers to listen in, make sure you have your volume turned all the way up, and dialed in by clicking Call with Computer. Those of you who need to call in using a phone, so if your computer doesn't have speakers for you to listen in, if you don't have a headset, if you're in an office, you can call in and listen in through the phone. So if you go to the tab Event Info, it lists the phone number there. It's 1-855-97-1485, and you'll have to tell the access code, which is 664-325-141. You can also call this number if you're having some issues with the software, and they can help you troubleshoot. The phones will be on mute during the presentation and the answer period, so please type your questions into the Q&A box in the chat box. You can do this during the presentation when the questions come to you. And I will read the questions to our presenter at the end of the presentation. We have Francine McDonald and Melody Carnes from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry here to help answer questions, as they were also heavily involved in this project. Reminder, the webinar is being recorded and will be posted online, so be viewed later for those who are unavailable to make it today. The presentation will be approximately 30 to 40 minutes, and we'll use the rest of the hour for questions and discussion. So that's about it. I would like to welcome our presenter, Alex Nuludis, who is an assistant park planner with Ontario Parks. Thank you very much, Alex, for presenting for us today, and I will hand it over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'd just like to thank OIPC for having me present today and Allison for facilitating. I'm excited to be given the opportunity to speak to everyone about a recent MNRF pilot project that focused on invasive Phragmites control efforts in Lake Erie coastal wetlands at Rondeau Provincial Park and in the Long Point region. So to provide an overall summary, in September of this year, the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, in partnership with several other organizations, successfully undertook a combination of aerial and ground treatments using an herbicide to control Phragmites in wet areas at Rondeau Provincial Park and in the Long Point area. This project was of particular importance for many reasons. Can you guys still see the slideshow?
Yeah, we can. It was black. It was just kind of skipping for a second there, but right now it's being static. So
it's fine right now.
Yeah, it's fine right now.
Okay, I think the computer just crashed on my end. I can't see anything. So maybe give me 2 seconds to switch to another computer if that's okay.
Okay. I'm just gonna, sorry about that, everyone. We're just gonna be 2 seconds, get everything going. I want to make sure that everyone can see the slides.
Okay, I think we were about here. So this pilot project was of particular importance for many reasons. First of all, both of these wetland ecosystems are home to significant natural values that are in danger of being lost due to the threat of Phragmites. Secondly, this project is the first time herbicide use has occurred in an aquatic or wetland area at this scale in Canada. To be expected, this project included an extensive monitoring program to assess the effects of the treatment method. Most of us here are very likely well-versed on the impacts of frag. I'm just going to highlight some of the main effects relevant to our treatment sites. Frag is considered Canada's worst invasive plant due to its aggressive nature. It's an invasive perennial grass, originally transported from Eurasia, that can grow upwards of 12 feet tall. It's allelopathic, which simply put means that it produces a chemical that reduces the growth of other species in the area, allowing its own exponential growth. And when established, its high biomass reduces light penetration to lower plants, restricts photosynthesis, and forms dense monoculture stands that eventually lead to reduced wildlife foraging and shelter. So before I get into detail about the project itself, I'm just going to provide a bit of information about the treatment sites and why were chosen. So for those of you who may be unfamiliar with the pilot project treatments, I've outlined them here on a map of southwestern Ontario. So they're both located along the north shore of Lake Erie. Here we have Rondeau Provincial Park and the general Long Point region. The local economies in both Long Point and Rondeau rely heavily on resource-related industries, in particular hunting, fishing, camping, and bird watching. The main concerns associated with the threat of Phragmites spread in the Rondeau and Long Point areas are associated with the changes in hydrology that could lead to the alteration of boating channels, wetlands drying up, the elimination of nursery and spawning grounds for local fish populations, and the loss of access points for various recreational activities. Long Point and Rondeau are two of the very few remaining coastal wetlands along Lake Erie that still maintain natural hydrological functions. Both are recognized globally as world-class areas for their biodiversity. Long Point is a UNESCO World Biosphere Reserve and a Ramsar site, or a wetland of international significance. Rondeau and Long Point coastal marshes are both important areas, globally significant for waterfowl and migratory land bird concentrations. And Long Point are designated as provincial life science areas of natural and scientific interest. Recent of provincial and federal assessment and recovery documents showed that 25% of Ontario's species at risk are considered to be threatened by Phragmites, and the Rondeau and Long Point areas contain higher concentrations of species at risk than the majority of the rest of the province. Rondeau itself is home to 18, and I believe Long Point is home to 15 species at risk. Some species include the eastern fox snake, spotted turtle, Fowler's toad, Blanding's turtle, swamp rose mallow, and the monarch butterfly. From local biologists and scientists advised that these areas were at their tipping points and action needed to be taken to avoid further and future loss of these values. Prior to the project, controls and best management practices provided short-term relief of Phragmites, but since chemical control efforts in Ontario are limited to dry areas only, long-term effectiveness has been limited by the inability to successfully control expansion in wet areas. Without effective aquatic management tools, experts predict that Phragmites will continue to expand rapidly, colonizing new and previously treated terrestrial areas. MNRF requested an emergency use registration of an herbicide, where glyphosate was the active ingredient, to control invasive Phragmites in the Long Point and Rondeau coastal marshes using both aerial and ground applications. Some of the key milestones that were involved in this project, just using a general timeline. So initial discussions began in early 2015 between MNRF's Policy Division, Regional Operations Division, and the Provincial Services Division. This is an incredibly unique project that allowed for the involvement and collaboration of so many different divisions within MNRF. Ongoing discussions with the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change and the completion of a class environmental assessment, the agency use registration was submitted in January of this year to Health Canada's Pest Management Regulatory Agency for review. Final project approval from PMRA was received in June of this year. In the procurement process, where we ended up hiring a private contractor to perform the work. Monitoring plans were prepared and submitted for review by DFO and MOECC before receiving our SARA permit and permit to perform an aquatic examination. Days prior to treatment, public notification occurred, and the physical herbicide application began on September 13th at Rondeau Provincial Park and concluded on September 21st in Long Point. Monitoring and evaluation is continuously underway. Public notification requirement associated with this project. To the application submitted to PMRA, there is extensive consultation. Comments received from various stakeholders were very supportive of this project. We were able to work together with local municipalities, health units, and emergency services, as well as post the project's implementation plan and real-time updates on the Ontario Phragmites Working Group's website. When approached, there were a variety of methods used to communicate messaging about the pilot project. This here just provides some examples of who we involved and who was notified. Services were delivered door to door to homeowners and residents within the general treatment site areas. Information session was held in the Long Point region, which had a great turnout, and those who attended were extremely supportive of the work being done. Some even had some Frag Fighters t-shirts, which I can show you in a few minutes. Signs were posted at both sites, and the treatment areas were closed to the public prior to and during treatment. So I have a few examples of some of the notifications methods that were used. So some of the signs we had up in Rondeau Park looked like this, outlining the treatment area and who to contact with questions. This is an example of the public information sign at Long Point, and the gentleman in the bottom right of the screen there is wearing his Fraggin' Slayer sweat t-shirt there. There's some signage posted at Long Point. There was a large electronic sign on the causeway on the way into Long Point with some details about the project. You might be asking how we were able to determine which areas in these coastal marshes were going to be treated using which method, aerial or ground. We collected data and some aerial imagery interpretation and created some maps that outlined where all of the Phragmites was located at both treatment sites. Treatment polygons were chosen based on a few criteria, which I will highlight. First off, the stands that we selected for aerial treatment had to be considered dense, which means that they needed to be composed of a minimum of 75% Phragmites. Additionally, we screened for specific pockets of frag that would be inaccessible using any other type of treatment method, be that from a boat, using ground machinery, or on foot using a backpack sprayer. And based on the logistics of using a helicopter for treatment, we also had a minimum size of a patch of frag that could be treated using this method. Though this project involved both aerial and ground treatment methods, both of which I will discuss in further detail a bit later, the majority of the work was completed using a helicopter, and therefore what I'm going to focus the majority of the presentation on. So in order for the aerial treatment to occur, there are various environmental conditions that had to be met. Flights only occur after the morning dew had burnt off. It could not be raining, nor could it be forecasted to rain for the next 12 hours. Winds could not exceed 16 kilometers an hour, which essentially means that there could be no wind at all. Additionally, the helicopter could not treat while flying any faster than 60 kilometers an hour. This is a much slower speed than what's commonly used in agricultural practices using a similar treatment method. Herbicide was restricted to a height of 3 meters above the plant. The width was about 65% of the total width of the blades of the chopper in order to assist with downdraft to ensure the herbicide was following a path straight down below. The helicopter itself was equipped with an automated navigation system. So we were able to provide shapefiles that mapped our target frag polygons to the pilot, which were then loaded into the system that instructed the helicopter when to turn on and off the boom based on what was read from our mapping. A couple of videos to show of the physical treatment happening. The first clip is of the crew loading the helicopter with the herbicide itself and its takeoff. I'm going to skip ahead here. You won't be able to hear anything, but trust me when I just tell you it was very loud and very windy. So I just want to note the speed of which the crew is able to load both the fuel and the chemical. It was about less than 2 minutes between each set of pass-throughs. And you'll notice in a couple seconds, when the helicopter takes off, he drops low to the ground, and this is just due to the weight difference after they've loaded the herbicide into the chopper. Is out where he has clearance, and then he'll fly back south. This one was taken at Rondeau, so he'll be flying south then just to go to the location of the treatment sites. And the second clip I will show you is of the physical treatment, and I'm going to apologize in advance for my very shaky hands. I was on a boat with a giant zoom lens taking this video, so it might be a little shaky. It'll take a couple passes here just as he treats one of the polygons of frag. And notice how low the helicopter comes before any of the herbicide was actually released. And that particles really fall directly below where they're being sprayed. Okay. So I have some of the actual flight data from the pilot of the treatment in the Long Point region. There's essentially 3 treatment sites here. We have the Long Point tip, which you'll see in pink, the Colony Lands, which is in green, and Crown Marsh in yellow. So the green, pink, and yellow lines are the actual flight paths that were taken by the helicopter. The white polygons that you can see underneath are the treatment areas. So in total, this project treated about 350 hectares of Phragmites in the Long Point area over the course of about 4 days. Here we have some similar flight data for Rondeau Provincial Park. The blue polygons you see are made up of the flight lines received from the pilot. Similarly to the Long Point imagery I just showed you, these polygons show exactly what was treated. So made up of the flight data from when the boom was on, the herbicide was being released. There were about 100 hectares of frag treated aerially in Rondeau. I'm hoping that this image and the previous maps from Long Point can really put into perspective the extent of Phragmites present in both of these sensitive areas. Another form of treatment that was used in the Long Point region under the emergency use registration was a form of ground treatment where they used this fancy machine here called the Marshmaster. Using this method, after locating accessible dense Phragmites polygons, an additional 40 hectares was treated. So in order to reduce environmental impacts, strict controls were put into place for this pilot project. Previously mentioned, there were some very strict environmental conditions which were required before any treatment occurred. And by that I mean the wind and weather. So the physical location followed requirements outlined by PMA, MOECC, and the product label. In order to maximize treatment success, application occurred during vulnerable life stages of Phragmites. Time was critical for this project. In order to reduce impacts to non-target species, strict timing windows were used. They occurred outside of bird breeding and nesting, when critical insect life stages were complete, when most native plants had to nest, when amphibians and reptiles were not yet in hibernation, and lastly, outside of our regulated hunting days. So the pilot project also included an intensive monitoring plan. MNRF has partnered with the University of Waterloo to monitor and analyze the efficacy of the herbicide treatment, the treatment on sensitive communities, the effect treatment on fish and fish habitat, the glyphosate AMPA, and the advent in water and sediment at the treatment sites as their dispersal from the treatment sites, and the glyphosate concentrations in ambient water samples within 800 meters of shoreline residents that were adjacent to treatment site areas in Long Point. So the team has established multiple permanent control plots to monitor the efficacy of the treatment in terms of the successful removal of Phragmites as well as the reestablishment of native vegetative communities. It was very important that we were able to determine the fate of glyphosate following treatment, and the monitoring team established sample plots at increasing distance intervals from the mouth of existing ponds within each treatment site. I was able to get out to treatment sites in Rondeau about 10 days after the herbicide application to see if we'd be able to notice a difference between treated and untreated Phragmites stands. So I apologize for the dark photo. It was a bit of a crummy day when I was able to get out there, but I'm hoping you'll be able to see the distinct difference in coloration here. You can make some of the edges of one of the treatment polygons. And an additional photo taken by Janice Gilbert on a sunny day. I think it was either the day before or the day after I was out there. That really shows the difference between the treated and untreated figs. So you can see in the middle of that patch there's a pretty distinct line. To your right, it's very yellow and discolored, and on the left, it's nice and green. Unfortunately, we won't be able to determine the true efficacy of the herbicide treatment until next spring. We're able to see what ends up growing back. However, based on the preliminary observations, we're very optimistic that the overall treatment was effective. Other of our monitoring questions are expected to be answered and reported to our regulating agencies in the new year, as we're still awaiting some of the monitoring results and the data analyzed from our partners at the University of Waterloo. Outlined in the 2011 Best Management Practices document for Phragmites, MNRF recommends combining two or more methods of treatment, as combinations of chemical and mechanical treatments are most effective. It is currently exploring options to roll and burn the treated Phragmites stands from this project to remove the biomass in the winter months of the new year. Rolling must occur a maximum of 48 hours before the burning occurs. These processes allow for the biomass to be removed, also destroying any viable seed heads, and creates the physical space for native plants to reestablish. As there are many factors that come into play when planning and implementing a project like this, as this is the first time this type of work has occurred in the province, it's an incredible learning experience as we worked through the processes involved. I had mentioned earlier, as I went through the general timelines of the project components, that there's excessive consultation, stakeholder engagement, monitoring plans that need to be developed, and multiple permits that need to be applied for and approved. As of today, there is still no registered herbicide for use over water in Canada, but it's projects like this one that was undertaken by MNRF that hope to serve as a stepping stone to one day have registered projects to continue work like this across the province and elsewhere. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge and thank everybody who was involved, both within the MNRF as well as the incredible list of partner organizations who worked together to implement this fantastic project. And I'd also like to thank OIC for allowing me to speak to everybody today. And with that, I will pass it back over to Allison and welcome questions that anybody may have. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Alex. So we're just going to unmute phones from Melody and Francine so you guys can assist in answering questions. So we'll get started. So Our question, how are you planning on removing the dead biomass?
And I'm not sure if you touched on that through one of your slides, but that was, yeah, one of the questions. It doesn't talk that with burning, but maybe you can just elaborate.
Sure. Yeah, so I guess, yeah, you're right. We kind of touched on that a bit with the rolling and burning. So that's sort of the purpose of doing that. It's one thing to treat it with an herbicide, but if that's all you're leaving the biomass there and not really promoting any growth of some of the native species that might still be in the seed bank. So yeah, rolling and burning is kind of the next step to physically remove the biomass and sort of open up some more space for some of those native plants to come back.
All right. So a question, what was the percent herbicide solution that was used during the aerial application?
I'm going to Francine or Melody answer that, if that's okay.
Yeah, for us a bit specific. And just a reminder, I see someone in chat, please, if you have any questions, yeah, just to, again, put them in the Q&A box. So, Francine, can you talk? You did. And
I
okay. Yep. So I don't know if you can answer that, Melody.
Maybe if we can come back to that. I'm just looking at the label right now because I honestly don't remember for aerial what it was. The recommendation requirement for the label for ground treatment was 1.5%. So I'll just, if we can do that one, I'll look it up on the label and then I can answer it.
I think the important point to know is that you did, like, we always, we encourage everyone to follow the label. So there are specific percentage applications on the label of the chemical being used. So, and a lot of information, if you go to the PMRA label search and you type in I'm not sure if this one would be up, it might be, the plant, then the label for that plant will come up as well.
This one is available, and we can send the direct link on the PMRA website if you wanted to, and then you could send it out to the participants.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, we will be sending a follow-up email, so we can include that in the email. Okay, so our next question, what's the cost per hectare?
Again, a specific kind of question.
I heard that. Is Francine on or no?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, I was having difficulty with my audio, so I'm glad I'm on now. So the question was, what was the cost per hectare? We don't have an exact number for cost per hectare, so to speak. We had to, with respect to the aerial application, we had to pay on a daily rate for the helicopter, and then a certain amount per hectare. So it's so the cost for aerial application can range. It costs us somewhere around $6,000 per day for aerial application, and then there's a cost for the actual hectares that are treated, about $100.
All right.
And then with respect to the grid, I don't know, Melody, if you wanted to speak to that, but it's really, I think it's all in terms of how much time does it take to do the actual treatment.
I think there are a couple different options in southwestern Ontario right now. Again, the price per hectare, if you wanted to average out that way, would range a little bit. It's somewhere around between like $50 and $400 per hectare, depending on exactly what is required.
Okay, thanks. Good to know. That's really great information. And this is being recorded, so it'll all be online after available online after as well. Still have quite a few questions, and some will be a bit repetitive, so we'll kind of defer. But go ahead, Alison.
Okay. So our next question: what application rate was used for the herbicide?
But we already kind of touched on that. Just to remind everyone, that information is in the label, which we will be sending around.
And the second half of the question: what surfactant was used?
Then there wasn't a surfactant. Is that correct? Or
A surfactant, yes.
oh, okay. Okay. Do you answer which one, or?
It was called AquaSurf.
AquaSurf. Okay.
So AquaSurf is a surfactant that's considered to be aquatic safe. So the product that we used, the herbicide, was Roundup Custom, and it doesn't have a surfactant in it. So that's what makes aquatic safe. But you do need to have a surfactant to increase the efficacy of the herbicide. So what we use is a product called AquaSurf, which is considered aquatic safe.
All right. Perfect. That's great.
And the label for that product it will also be on the site, on the PMRA's website as well. So we'll make sure we have a link to both.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
That's great. So next question: are you permitted to do follow-up treatment next year? Sorry, or multiple years?
It's Francine speaking. So it's so the emergency use is granted on sort of a one-time only basis. So it was essentially the time frame for the emergency use was expired in November. So we will need to reapply for an emergency application again in order to do retreatments for next year.
Great. So this one, the next one, I think it's a bit of I think we answered part of it already. What is the cost per acre? Yeah, so we kind of touched on that already. Also helps with the cost rolling per hectare or acre. I'm not sure if that's something that you can provide as well. For the rolling information.
Do you want to speak to that?
Sorry, waiting to see Alex. Again, the cost varies. There's generally a range. It's typically about the same as herbicide treatment. And the reason for that is related to the type of equipment that's required and the short time frame within which we have to roll. But again, it varies between $200 and $400 per.
Good. Okay. So now a question about rolling, more specifically in the wetland areas. Are you using rolling and burning specifically in the wetland to remove the biomass?
That they know you've done it in terrestrial areas, but how exactly would it work in the wetland for the roll burning?
So it's a bit trickier in the wetland just based on the stability of the ground and being able to get in there to do the work, which is why we proposed a winter burn. So it's very weather dependent. You kind of need the perfect window where it's cold enough that the ground is still frozen to support the weight of the people working in the equipment. So no snow at the same time, so that everything can burn. It's just a question. I don't know if Francine or Melody want to expand on that.
No, I think that's accurate. Basically, it's a very narrow window. We sometimes don't always encounter the right conditions to be able to winter burn. So burning in wetlands is a bit tricky. There are other options towards removing the biomass and the seed heads, but it's and burning is the most efficient.
Okay.
Right. So another question, do other areas and people have access to the Marsh Master? Someone is wondering who owns the Marsh Master? Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, there are a couple people who undertake this type of work, and I know there are new people entering the market. So that we can acknowledge any of them, but I think for anyone who's interested to speak to people like Janice Gilbert or some of the folks in Long Point, like the Long Point Ratepayers Association and that, they would be able to give contacts.
Right. So I can send out Janice information. I've seen, I think there was just an article about Lambton Shores. They were using a Marsh Master as well. So Janice's contact information for those people who want to know more about that.
Okay, so now we kind of have an overview question. Is there anything you would do differently if you could do this again?
That's it.
If Melody or Francine want to jump in on that one, that's kind of a very overarching. This was the first time that this did happen, so it was definitely, the whole thing was a learning experience.
So the results of our efficacy monitoring, it's really hard to be able to speak to that right now. Acknowledging the time that it took, I think for us it took a bit longer than we had and that we expected. So just allowing the time to work through the process.
So I just we have about 15 minutes still, and there are quite a few questions. If we don't get through them all, again, when we send that follow-up email, I can include you guys' contact information if you guys don't mind. Melody and Francine, do you mind that if just if there's some other questions we didn't get to?
No problem.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, it looks like we have a few more herbicide questions coming up. So the next one, why did you pick glyphosate over imazapyr?
I'd like to take that one.
So in the U.S., they use both products to control Phragmites, and we were in the initial stages of the project. We were having discussions with both manufacturers for those products. Melody talked in her last response about the time associated with doing this application and how much time it took, and that it started discussions around this project probably around 2 years ago, and at the time we were exploring using both products. But when it came down to the timing in terms of submitting our application, the one company that Monsanto, who we worked with related to the glyphosate product, was able to ensure that we could get the product that we needed in the time that we needed. So the other manufacturer for imazapyr at the early stages of the project, they weren't able to provide us with a commitment with respect to the product that we needed to treat, hundreds of hectares with respect to the project size. We didn't know at the time when we were doing our initial conversations and planning for the project that it would take us 2 years to get the project off the ground. So we probably, in hindsight, had more opportunity to work with another manufacturer at the time, but essentially, when it came time to submit the application, we had established an agreement with the glyphosate manufacturer, so we went with that one. It's not to say that we wouldn't exclude doing work with that other product in the future, and I think we're looking at those options. But it was really, to start with, it was just a timing issue in terms of establishing the agreement with the manufacturer and ensuring that we were able to get the product, the sufficient product that we needed to do the work. Melody, would you add anything to that?
I think that's exactly it.
Okay, good to know.
Okay, so we'll move along. Our next question, how do you ensure that the Phragmites seed heads are killed? This person's wondering if the herbicide takes care of it or if you needed to implement another treatment to kill the seed heads.
The herb does kill the plant, but you're right, the seed heads can sometimes still be viable, which is why in the BMPs for dealing with Phragmites, it is recommended that you pair it with another type of chemical or mechanical control, which is why we are exploring the roll burning, and that ensures that the seed heads are removed from the area.
Okay, good. So again, because we have so many questions, what formula of glyphosate? So it was Roundup Custom, is that's correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's a different kind of Roundup than what you would use for industrial application. It's specifically designed to be used in aquatic situations.
Okay. Okay. So this next one's a bit tricky because you haven't finished the monitoring, but go ahead.
This person's wondering, what are the implications and impacts of glyphosate on fish and amphibians?
So are other ecological parameters included in the monitoring to determine like unexpected impacts? So they just like more about monitoring and potential impacts.
So it's Melody. We did have some infill fish monitoring, and there was some additional fish monitoring work that happened in Long Point, and that was part of our authorizations through the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. There is literature on the effects of glyphosate on fish and amphibians and that sort of thing, and it is generally considered to be one of the safer chemicals related to environmental effects, which is one of the positive things associated with glyphosate. It's not potentially harmful in the environment to some other chemicals.
So here's a good question. When will rolling and burning take place? Will the control site that was only sprayed but will not be burned?
We're working through that. University of Waterloo, who's undertaking the monitoring for us. We're looking at measuring efficacy of the entire treatment, like the undertaking, which is not just herbicide treatment, it's also rolling and burning. So depending on what this winter shapes up to be, it could be that we burn all sites, including the control sites, and that we end up doing a mix based on wetlands and that sort of stuff. But we're leaving that up to the University of Waterloo to help us develop a strong study design.
Okay. I guess it'll be like published kind of something, maybe through the university, I guess, of like afterwards, for people to refer to, of like just up of the project and then the results and things like that.
I would expect the University of Waterloo to be publishing, but that's really their aim.
Right.
So we're not requiring them to publish anything, but given the kind of that this is a pilot project for Ontario, there would be an opportunity to publish.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So our next question, how much prep field work was done before management occurred? Was it using infrared desktop exercise or field verification? So did you go out and do the prep, or was it, I guess maybe they're referring to like areas and how
how much into actually like finding, like securing those locations and making sure that the pilots had those locations as well?
I guess kind of the beginning of that question, the answer would be both. So we did have crew out doing mapping on the ground. They did do a few flights beforehand as well. And then there was also a lot of desktop, I guess. And I mentioned in the presentation that in terms of where we chose the sites, specifically within Rondeau and Long Point, it was based on a few things. It was based on the size, because we knew we were going to be doing some aerial treatment. It was also the stands themselves had to be dense, so that was the 75% or greater of Phragmites, as well as, what was one, Melody? Can you help me out? Oh, accessibility. If we weren't able to get them via another kind of treatment, be that on foot with a backpack sprayer, or using the Marshmaster, or treatment using a boat or anything like that, then that was kind of how we selected what was going to be treated aerially, because that's the only way that they were going to be accessed.
I don't know if you touched on this already, but go ahead.
Okay, in 2017 growing season, will you be doing follow-up spot treatments? And if so, how? So, for example, will it be done using a backpack sprayer?
Going to kind of have to be a wait and see sort of thing. Once the growing season starts and we see what has come back and where and how dense and that kind of thing, we can determine sort of what the best method to treat those areas. But ideally, yes, we would be doing some spot treatment.
Okay.
And contingent on us receiving approval for another emergency registration.
That kind of relates to our third questions, but
yeah, so I guess that kind of relates to this question here. Does the emergency permit allow you to use the pest or the herbicide only or repeatedly? So just one then?
I think Fran touched on that, or yeah, the emergency use registration that we had was a one-time only thing, and it ended in November. So if we were to move forward, their application would have to be submitted again.
Right. Sorry for the.
No worries.
Good to clarify. I guess this is a broad. I know we touched on. Maybe this is, I don't know. We touched on cost before, but I guess
the herbicide alone.
Yeah.
But this question is, what was the overall cost of the project?
Yeah. Could you broad number?
Fran, do we have a?
No.
Sorry, I was at this point. I don't think we do. We know what the cost was for the actual treatment, but we still have the rolling and burning to do. There's the environmental monitoring and that sort of stuff. So at this point, we're not able to kind of give an entire cost for the whole project.
Okay. I think part of the reason I think I kind of know why people are asking, because we get a lot of those questions, like when it was a totally entirely different project and it was a lot larger scale, but we get a lot of cost questions. That's probably why these questions are coming up, because people kind of know what to expect to plan, like if they were going to do like a rolling and burning or something like that. So, but usually it'd be really, I can see why the total cost isn't kind of narrowed down yet, but this is a good one, another specific. Go ahead.
How many days did the helicopter treatment occur?
It was over 2 days at Rondeau to treat 100 hectares, and I think it was 4. Francine, correct me if I'm wrong, but 4 days for the 3 different sites at Long Point.
Yeah, close.
This is an interesting one. Was there aerial photography that was used to, like, I know the frag obviously is so bare and so thick, but were you at all worried, like, they didn't know if there was any native vegetation that you had to worry about when spraying, like aerial, if you had to kind of figure that out ahead of time, or was it just all frag?
So I see what we saw. We did a lot of prep work in advance to try and really focus the treatment on high density frag to minimize native plant mortality. And realistically, we're not going to know a lot of native plant mortality until we look at some of the environmental monitoring next growing season. It would be very difficult to say we had no native plant impact, just because of sort of where we were treating, but we did our best to minimize any intended effects and tried to focus on those high density fragmite patches.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Sorry, I'm not trying to. There's just a lot of questions. We're trying to get through them, but this is a good one actually.
Okay. If the test results come in as anticipated, might this lead to more sites in Ontario being considered for an emergency use project? Or what could be like the future, I guess?
So I guess that maybe just to step back a little bit, we might want to explain sort of the process for emergency registrations and sort of like how we were able to obtain registration in the first place. So in order to get the emergency registration, we need the support. We need support from the manufacturer of the herbicide. They have to agree to be part of the project, and they have to agree to the amount of, the scope of the project. And then the premise of the submission to PMRA is that we are dealing with a true emergency. So it was challenging for us to make that argument when we started the conversation about Phragmites, because, as I think everyone is aware, it has been present in Ontario for many decades. Our argument for this being an emergency at Long Point and Rondeau was essentially the imminent threat to species at risk. We have, as Alex indicated, there are I think 20 species at risk within those two sites, and they are at a critical point with respect to Phragmites. And if we did not manage Phragmites at those sites, those species could potentially be lost. And that was essentially the premise of this emergency registration, was the ecological sensitivity of these two sites in particular. We've described this as a pilot project. So we have the objective of protecting these two sites and contributing to the recovery of these species at risk and restoring these wetland systems. But I guess our secondary objective is that this pilot project, the monitoring and testing that we're doing associated with the project, may help answer some of the questions that the regulatory agencies like PMRA and our own Ministry of Environment might have with respect to the effects of these products. Right. So that might help with respect to sort of their future considerations if a submission for this product is made for a full registration in the future. So it's a kind of a long answer. To the question, but I think at this point we don't have a mandate to expand an emergency registration into new areas of the province. What we need to do is answer some of the key questions that may exist about these products that can help the regulatory agencies make decisions if a full registration request is ultimately submitted.
Right. No, it's definitely long and complicated, but I think I'm glad you were able to explain that, though, because and all this information is being recorded and posted, because it's important that everyone kind of begins to understand that this is a pretty lengthy process, and it's kind of just a start. But yeah, no, thank you for explaining that. So we're getting close, and I know some people could probably stay longer than others, but we do kind of want to wrap it up. So I think we have we just have 2 more questions. There are other questions, and I apologize that we didn't get to them, but like I said, I'll provide the contact information, and you can email our experts here today the questions, so I do apologize in advance, but I think we have 2 more, so we'll let Alison say the second last one.
Okay, so this person from the audience says, it looks like you did not treat all areas of Phragmites. Prevent the treated areas from recolonizing again, either from the untreated areas or from elsewhere. If it came once, won't it come in again?
So that's a heavy loaded question, but my point is like is there any ideas about preventing spread to the treated areas?
So, I mean, that's pretty accurate. That's one of the reasons why generally the BMP in place recommend multiple treatments, as we recognize that if any frag is left, it's going to colonize. It's really just a matter of how long it takes it. So the more frag you're able to control, the slower the recolonization of your site. But generally, recolonization occurs anywhere between 2 and 5 years after management.
Okay. So unfortunately, yes, like I said, I'll squeeze one more in, and I've seen a couple people comment on this. So I guess, did you have any, last but not least, any positive or negative reaction from the public around this project?
We're waiting to see who's going to speak first.
I know.
So we actually had a lot of positive feedback from the project. We did a lot of advanced communication. In Rondeau Provincial Park, we've been treating Phragmites for more than 8 years now. So it's a long-running ground treatment, terrestrial treatment project. And there's been a huge amount of outreach and education that's gone along with that. And then the Long Point region, part of the reasoning behind that specific area, aside from the globally significant designations that it has, was that the community itself was calling for the action. And often, you know, on the days of treatment, we often heard, we had people come up to us and that they were saying, you know, this is about time. We're glad I'm getting to this, because I think really across the province, everybody is acknowledging there's an issue, and we're not pro-herbicide by any means, but sometimes you have to use the best tool for the job, and in this case, exploring the use of this tool could be really important for Phragmites management in Ontario.
Sure. Good to hear. And I know we had, as OIPC, had a bit of just like some information on the Phragmites group, and we didn't get any negative or anything like that either. So I think people just recognize how important it is, and yeah, it's quite a project. So like I said, there's so many other questions, but unfortunately, I think we are going to have to cut it off. So I guess just thank you, and if you guys, again, okay with us providing your contact information, then people can just email you their questions that didn't get answered.
We'll send out an email to everyone with a follow-up survey for the webinar, and also we'll provide those links that were discussed. So Jay Gilbert's contact information and a direct link with label information for herbicides. Yeah, thank you very much, Alex, for presenting, and for Melody and Francine for jumping in to help answer some questions. And just a quick reminder that our next webinar will be on January 11th. It will be a water soldier status update in Ontario, and it'll be presented by Robert McGowan with the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thanks.